Hey guys, welcome back to another video on my channel. We are 18 days away from election day. We are in the final stretch, and in today's video we are going to be filling out this map based on the polling averages for every swing state and competitive state. But before we get started on this video, please subscribe if you're new to my channel, like my content, put all your comments, suggestions, and questions in the comment section below, and please check out my other content once you're done watching this video. And today we're going to be using the Real Clear Politics average of polling to fill out this 2024 map. And before we get into each state in specific, let's take a little bit of a look at the popular vote. And right now, Harris is up by 1.4%. As we can see here, this is one of the narrower margins that she's been up. She used to be up in last month by around 1 to 2 points, more on that 2-point edge. It has tightened significantly, and that's not really her losing support. It's just Donald Trump gaining more undecideds than she's gaining. She hasn't really gained much support since September, but Donald Trump has gained around a point from around 46 to around 46, 47 to around 48 almost. So he's almost at 48%. We had two polls that have him up. If we have Fox News and Rasmussen reports, many ties. Emerson is the latest to come out. This actually rounds to a tie. They are closer to a tie than her being up by 1. And that is a sharp decline from her lead of around 2 points previously, and then 3 points before that. Same thing with Harvard-Harris. She has been up a lot more. In tip insights, also, she was up by around 3 to 4 points, and now she's up by around 2. So every pollster has tightened, except Marist is the only one where she has expanded her lead, but that is the only poll in this average where she leads by more now than what she did in their previous poll. And once again, this is about the states in general, but looking at this 1.4 percentage point lead, it is significantly lower than Biden's 9-point lead at October 18, 2020. And Clinton's 7-point lead on October 18, 2016. So this right here is a big worrying sign for Democrats and for Kamala Harris's campaign, that she's only up 1.4 in the popular vote, which would entail an electoral college vote loss. Same thing with 538. They have her at around a 2-point lead nationally, and that also is not good for her campaign at all. Let's remember, we had in 2016, Clinton once again was supposed to win by around 7 at this time. She ended up winning the popular vote by around 2. She lost the electoral college 306 to 232, I believe. So that didn't really work too much out for them. But let's go now to the polls in all of these states. And we're going to go to see what most of these polling averages are. Now, keep in mind, a lot of these states do not have polling averages. So I'm going to fill out all the states that have no polling averages first, so you guys can just see the states that do have averages. And now that those states have been filled out on this map, as you can see, the states already filled out either do not have a polling average, do not have a single poll, or they're just really safe, and that one poll that has come out doesn't really matter enough to move the needle at all. So all these states already filled out, we know are going to most likely go for that candidate 12 or up. New Jersey is the exception because we actually don't have any new polls that have Trump versus Harris. So I have to leave it in that safe column for Harris, but don't expect this to be a safe state, 100% guaranteed. I wouldn't be surprised if it falls under 12 points. But let's get to the states that have polling now. And the first one is Washington. And in Washington, we do have 2 polls available. Harris is up by 21 points, which is a little bit more than Biden's final margin. And that's because this poll has dropped out. So her margin has exceeded. And that'll be going in that safe column for her on this map. The state of Oregon only has 1 poll. It's a very old poll, and it only has Harris up by 5. So we're going to be putting that in the lean column for her. I do expect her to win it by a safe state, but that's the only poll we do have. The state of California do have quite a few polls, and they all show her winning by a 23.7-point margin, which is a lot less than Biden's margin. However, it is still going to be going in that safe column. We're going to skip over the state of Nevada and go to the state of Utah, where we do have a little bit of polling. Trump is up 24 points, which is 3 points better than his 2020 win, which would put it in that safe column. Skipping past Arizona, because we'll go over the swing states later. Montana is going to be the next state, and usually this state is not really polled much. But since there's a very competitive Senate race, Trump is up by 17.4 points, which is 1 point better than his 2020 win, putting it in the safe column for him. Going now to the state of Colorado, we do have one poll. Harris is up by 11, which is 2.5 points worse than the final margin in 2020, which would put it in the likely column for the vice president. Going now to the state of New Mexico, Harris is up by 8 points, which is around 2 to 3 points worse than Biden's final margin in 2020. And this would put the state also in the likely column. Now we're going to go to the state of Texas, and this is a state that Democrats have been targeting a lot, but has not trended favorably in their way in the past couple elections because Hispanic trends are going against them. Trump is up by 5.7%, and that is exactly the same margin as his 2020 win. And polls have been all over the place. Some have had him up by larger margins than other, but the general consensus is around 5.7, which would put the state in the lean column for the former president. Now the state of Minnesota, a state that Tim Walz is from, a state that Democrats should win. She's up by 4.7 in the polling, which is 3 points less than Biden's 7.2 percentage point win in the 2020 election. So that'll be going in the lean column for her. Skipping over all three Rust Belt states and going to the state of Indiana. This will be a safe state for Trump, and the polls do indicate him winning by 16.5%, which is exactly the same as his 2020 win. We should expect similar results and put that in the safe column for him. To the state of Ohio now, another state that Republicans have been doing very good in recently. There's an important Senate race that we all definitely have to watch out for that will be close. But in the presidential race, don't expect this to be close. In the polls right now, Trump leads by 7.4%, which is 1 point less than his 2020 win. But remember how bad the polling is in the state of Ohio when they had Trump up only half a point 4 and 8 years ago when he ended up overperforming it by around 7 to 8 points. This will go in the likely column for the former president. The state of Virginia is another state that Democrats have been doing well in previous elections, especially in 2020 when Joe Biden won it by 10. But now the polling indicates a reversal, and she's only up by 6.4%, which is around 3 to 4 points less than Biden's win. But still, it's going to go in that likely column for the vice president. Skipping over North Carolina, let's go to South Carolina to see very limited polling, but we do have one poll that has Trump up by 10, which is around a point worse than his 2020 win, putting it in the likely column for him. Now to the state of Florida, probably the most right-trending state in the nation. We had a New York Times and Siena poll that has Trump up by 14 points. The average, however, has him up by 6.1%, a big change from 2020 and 2016, and that is outperforming his margin, probably even doubling it according to the polls, and that would put it at around a likely win for him, 6 points on this map. And finally, we're going to go to the Northeast before we get back to the swing states, starting with DC. I forgot there is no polling, so that'll go safe for Kamala Harris. The state of Maryland is an extremely safe state, but we have a lot of polls because of the Senate race. She is up by 29 points, which is a few points worse than Biden's performance, but still in that safe column. Going now to the state of Delaware, not too many polls, but we do have one, and it shows Harris up by 1. It shows Harris up by 20, which is 1 point more than the 2020 results. I don't expect this to carry out because this was Biden's home state. I think she'll do a lot worse, actually, in the state of Delaware. Going now to the states of Connecticut and Rhode Island. Very limited polling once again, but we do have a poll out of Connecticut that has Harris up by 16, which is 4 points worse than Biden's win. And then in Maryland, a win of 20 points, which is the exact same margin as Biden's win. So both these states will be going into that safe column. Two more states in the Northeast to go over. We do have the state of New York, which is generally considered a safe state, but the polls only have her up by 13.5%, which is a whopping 10 points worse than Biden's 2020 win. But still, it puts it barely in that safe column. But that is definitely a worrying sign about New York. If it's 10 points worse, they have to also think about New Jersey, since these states definitely vote in tandem. And then finally, the final state in the Northeast will be the state of New Hampshire, where she is performing well, 7.8%, which is a little bit more than Biden's win in 2020, putting it in that likely column. And now we're left with the final 7 states, the most competitive states, and these states will be decided by a lean or tilt margin, most likely. And we're going to be going through them from Nevada all the way to the East Coast, where Pennsylvania and North Carolina is. So starting with Nevada, we do have a lot of polling. Obviously, the rest of the states that we do have a lot of polling, and Trump has recently flipped it from around Harris +1 to around Trump plus 0.5. That is because of this outlier poll here that has him up by 6. The rest of the polls do have her up by 1, and there's one that has him up by 1. I do expect this state to be down to the wire, definitely a 50-50 state, but the polls right now do show him up by 0.5, so that is going to be a tilt margin for him. Next, in the state of Arizona, this is probably his strongest swing state besides North Carolina. That is because he leads almost every poll. He leads the average by 1.4% and has remained really steady. Most of the polls do have him up, if you can see from the history. And he is overperforming Biden's 2020 margin, where he was supposed to win by 3.9%. And that's a huge swing from 2020, and it would put the state in the tilt column for the former president and put him all the way up to 236. Before we go to the Rust Belt, let us take down Georgia and North Carolina. These are 2 states that Trump is also favored to win in the polls. In the state of Georgia, he leads by 1.1%. And this is generally a state that has the most accurate polling, because look how accurate it was in 2020 and in 2016. In 2016, it was very accurate. Trump won by around this margin. And in 2020, it was also very accurate. Biden only won by around a point less than what this says. And if these also hold true in this election cycle, we should expect Trump to win the state by 1 to 2%. And he also has maintained a steady lead over the past month and has led most of the polls. So this will be going in that tilt column for the former president. And next, in the state of North Carolina, another state that I do expect Trump to be able to pull off. He is up by 1 point. There had been a Quinnipiac poll that has it as a 3-point lead for Harris. They oversampled Democrats a huge amount. Once again, an outlier. This will most likely not play out. Going back to 2020 and 2016, Biden and Clinton were both supposed to win the state, and Trump ended up winning it. So Trump now being favored to win according to the polls definitely shows us that he will most likely win the state, and the polling has him up by 1 point, putting it in that tilt column for him. Going now to probably the most watched area in this election cycle, it would be the 3 swing states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And usually going back into the polls in this era, we do see that Democrats are vastly overestimated and are more favored to win than in the Sun Belt. But let's go to each of these states according to polls. Number 1 in the state of Wisconsin. This is probably the most shocking out of all the swing states because of how bad the polling is. And actually, Trump is up by 0.1%. She hasn't even led a poll in Wisconsin since last month. And that's a big worrying sign for her, because she had been leading the state of Wisconsin in the polling by around 1 to 2 points in general. But now the polls have switched up. The past 2 polls have had Trump up by 2 points, including Quinnipiac, and we know how left-leaning they are. And back in 2020 and in 2016, Biden and Clinton were both supposed to win by 6 points or over. So this is a huge shift on our map and would put the state in the tilt column for the former president. It continues in the state of Michigan, where he leads by 0.9%, another flip from when Harris was leading the state by around 2. And once again, Biden and Clinton, 7 points and 12. This is a huge shift from the 2020 and 2016 elections. It could be either said to be a correction in the polls, or it could be a huge shift towards the right, and all of us are are probably going to see a win that is much larger than the polls are saying. But either way, going only according to the polls, this would be a tilt margin for him. He's up in Michigan by 1 point according to the polls. And finally, in the state of Pennsylvania, he is up by 0.5 percentage points, a huge overperformance from previous elections as well. That is the general theme with all of these swing states. He is performing extremely well compared to his past performances, so much to now that he's leading in every single swing state. If we check the no toss-up map, according to polls, he is at 312 to 226, which is what my map over here displays in terms of margins. And so that's going to be our map according to the polls. 312 to 226, a massive reversal to when previously I had predicted that she was doing better in these Rust Belt states according to polls, and they had her up in all three of them. But now Trump is up in all three of them. We still have 18 days, so we're going to see how the polling changes. But for the most part, it's not going to change too much because polling sites are coming out now with their final polls. There's not going to be too many released. So Trump is also looking in a very good shape in this election according to the polls. But that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, like all my videos, put all your suggestions in the section below, and I'll check you guys out in the next one.